An elderly woman once found a helpless kitten in the rain. But as the little creature grew, what she saw one day left her utterly shocked. Martha lived a peaceful life in a small house at the edge of a quiet town. Since her husband passed away, the days had blurred together, marked by silence and calm. Her only source of joy came from the flowers in her garden, which she tended to with great care. Each morning, as the first light of dawn streamed through the windows, Martha would brew herself a cup of tea and sit on her veranda. Gently rocking in her old wooden chair, she gazed out at the world, lost in memories of better days with her late husband. Though neighbors often invited her to join them, Martha preferred the solitude of her own company. It had quietly become her companion. One chilly autumn evening, as the wind picked up and dark clouds gathered, Martha heard an unfamiliar sound coming from her yard. Wrapping herself in a warm shawl, she stepped outside. There it was again, a soft, desperate squeak. It was a kitten's cry. The rain had started tapping on the roof, and the air had turned sharp with cold. She hesitated for a moment. Should she venture out in such weather? But the sound grew louder, tugging at her heart. With a flashlight in hand, she ventured into the night. Her feet sank into the damp grass as she slowly circled the house. Then, in the glow of her flashlight, she saw something move near the base of an old oak tree. There, shivering and soaked, was a tiny, fluffy kitten, no bigger than the palm of her hand. Martha's heart melted. She gently scooped it up and held it close to her chest. It had soft, gray-brown fur and wide, terrified eyes. A crack of thunder rumbled through the sky, and the kitten clung to her sweater, trembling with fear. She hurried inside, feeling its tiny heartbeat race against her own. Martha carefully bathed the kitten with warm water, dried it off with a towel, and filled a small bowl with warm milk. The kitten drank eagerly before curling up on her lap, finally falling into a peaceful sleep. That night, Martha stayed awake, listening to the kitten's tiny breaths, worried it might catch a cold. By morning, however, the kitten was full of energy, pouncing on the curtains and exploring every corner of the house. She named him Smokey and took him to the local vet for a checkup. Dr. Morgan said Smokey was healthy, just very young, and would need extra care. Martha didn't mind. For the first time in years, she had purpose again. Watching Smokey grow brought a happiness she hadn't felt in a long time. He was smart, energetic, and always up to some harmless mischief. But as Smokey grew, Martha began to notice strange things about him. His eyes were a deep, glowing yellow, rounder than most cats. His cheeks were puffed out with fluffy fur, and his legs were unusually short. She chalked it up to his breed, but there was something distinctly odd about him. Despite his short legs, he was incredibly agile, easily scaling the curtains. Smokey would often sit on the windowsill, watching the birds and squirrels in the garden. And he grew faster than expected. His fur thickened, particularly around his cheeks and tail, giving him an almost regal look. Martha spoiled him with treats and toys, including a little stuffed mouse that Smokey attacked with wild enthusiasm. His movements were unnervingly fast, too fast for such a young kitten. In the garden, Smokey never left Martha's side. In the evenings, he'd curl up on her lap while she read or watched TV. Since his arrival, she felt rejuvenated. Her loneliness faded, her energy returned, and even her joint pain seemed to ease. One sunny afternoon, while Martha was tending to her flowers, Smokey suddenly froze. Martha followed his gaze and spotted a tiny field mouse darting through the grass. Without hesitation, Smokey leapt forward and caught it, perfectly. Martha was stunned. How could such a small kitten hunt with such skill? Feeling proud, Martha bought a small blue leash to show him off to her friends. But whenever she brought it out, Smokey darted under the bed, refusing to wear it. His behavior became more peculiar. Loud noises, like the vacuum or ringing phone, sent him running to hide. When winter came, his coat grew thicker, and turned a shimmering silver, making him look twice his size. One snowy morning, Martha found Smokey outside, joyfully running through the snow. Most cats hated the cold, but Smokey reveled in it, rolling in the snow and chasing flakes, only coming inside when tempted by treats. As time passed, more oddities emerged. Smokey ignored catnip, but chewed on twigs and grass. Martha was puzzled, but dismissed it. Until one afternoon, something truly strange happened. While dusting the living room, Martha accidentally knocked over a vase. The crash echoed through the room. In an instant, Smokey shot across the floor and disappeared under the couch. But instead of the usual frightened meow, he let out a low, rumbling growl. It wasn't the sound of a cat. It sounded like a wild predator. The chilling growl echoed through the house, freezing Martha in place. Her heart raced as she whispered to herself, "What are you, Smokey?" The strange sound only deepened Martha's confusion. Slowly, she knelt beside the couch, peering into the dark space beneath, trying to comprehend how such a small creature could produce such a deep, unsettling noise. A few days later, Martha's old friend June came over for a visit. As soon as she entered the front door, Smokey watched her silently from his usual spot on the windowsill, his piercing yellow eyes fixed and unblinking. June gasped. "Oh my goodness, Martha! What is that? He doesn't look like a normal cat at all." Her voice was filled with shock, and she pointed directly at Smokey. The reaction struck Martha hard. June's words echoed in her mind long after she left, stirring up doubts she hadn't wanted to acknowledge. Could there really be something unusual about Smokey? Martha began paying closer attention to her companion, truly observing him. During the day, she followed his curious habits, and at night she stayed awake, quietly studying his movements. The more she watched, the more unsettled she became. Something was off. His round face, short ears, thick, bushy tail, it all seemed too wild, too strange. His eyes especially seemed to hold secrets, as if he came from somewhere far beyond her peaceful garden. The growing unease pushed her to take action. One morning, with a nervous breath, Martha placed Smokey into his pet carrier. Her hands trembled. She wasn't sure what answers she was seeking, but she knew she had to know. Dr. Morgan, the town's trusted veterinarian, greeted her warmly, but as he began his examination, his expression gradually shifted. His brow furrowed, deepening with every inspection of Smokey's teeth, coat, and eyes. The longer he looked, the more puzzled he seemed. Minutes passed in tense silence, broken only by the rustling of papers as he made notes, occasionally shaking his head in confusion. Finally, he looked up at Martha. "You know, Mrs. Miller," he said slowly, almost cautiously, "I can't say for sure, but your little friend might not be an ordinary house cat." Sorry to interrupt the story. If you're enjoying this tale, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more incredible stories to you. Thank you. Now let's get back to the mystery of Smokey. Dr. Morgan stroked Smokey's thick silver fur, his voice calm yet curious. His teeth are shaped differently from any domestic breed I've ever seen. And his coat? It doesn't match any known house cat I've encountered in my 30 years of veterinary experience. I'd like to run a few more tests to be sure. Martha nodded, her stomach twisted with worry. Over the next few days, she lived on edge. Every phone ring startled her. Every text message made her heart race. What if Smokey wasn't a normal cat? Could she still keep him? Would someone take him away? The thought made her stomach churn with fear. She started recording videos of Smokey, capturing his odd behaviors, his strange reactions to sounds, his movements, and the way his eyes gleamed in the dark. Each moment now felt like a clue, a piece of the puzzle she needed to solve. Then, finally, the call came. Dr. Morgan's voice was calm but serious. "Mrs. Miller, I'd like you to come in. We need to talk. In person." Heart pounding, Martha bundled Smokey in her arms and made her way to the clinic. Strangely, Smokey seemed perfectly calm, as though he knew this moment was important. Inside the vet's office, Dr. Morgan opened a large book and pointed to a photo that left Martha breathless. "Mrs. Miller," he said carefully, "your pet is not a domestic cat. He's a Pallas's cat, a rare wild species native to Central Asia." Martha blinked, stunned. The photo looked exactly like Smokey. Same round face, short legs, fluffy fur, and piercing yellow eyes. Dr. Morgan continued, "Pallas's cats are endangered. They live in remote regions and avoid humans at all costs. They're solitary by nature, incredibly difficult to raise in captivity, and require special diets and environments to survive." He looked at Smokey, then back at Martha, with a sense of awe. "But somehow, you've done an incredible job. He's thriving. It's nothing short of extraordinary." "But now," Dr. Morgan said softly, placing a reassuring hand on Martha's shoulder, "we have to think about what comes next." That evening, Martha sat in silence by the window, with Smokey curled beside her as always. But everything felt different. The truth had shifted something deep inside her. Smokey was still the same sweet, curious creature she loved, but now she knew that he didn't truly belong in her world. Her heart was torn in two. She watched Smokey as he napped, stretched, and roamed the apartment with his silent grace, and each moment filled her with both warmth and sorrow. Could she really let him go? She already knew the answer, even if it shattered her heart. Her apartment, cozy as it was, wasn't a place for a wild animal. She lacked the expertise, the proper environment, and the legal right to keep an endangered species. The more she read, the clearer it became. What Smokey needed was a life that she couldn't provide. After many emotional conversations with wildlife experts and legal advisors, Martha made the hardest decision of her life. She agreed to transfer Smokey to a wildlife rehabilitation center, one that specialized in rare species like his. There he would receive the care, diet, and environment he needed, and, if possible, be prepared for release into the wild. The morning of their goodbye arrived with heavy clouds in the sky, mirroring Martha's mood. Her hands shook as she filled out the final forms. Tears stained the papers. She held Smokey close, memorizing every detail of his soft fur, his golden eyes, and the gentle rhythm of his purring. Smokey, as if understanding, gently rubbed his head against her arm. He didn't struggle or resist. He simply looked at her, calm and knowing. The staff at the center were kind and compassionate. They promised Martha they would send her updates, photos, videos, and progress reports. Their words offered some comfort, but the emptiness inside her couldn't be filled. The days that followed were slow and quiet. The apartment felt too still. Martha often found herself looking for Smokey in the corners of each room, missing the sound of his paws, the flick of his tail. Weeks turned to months. Seasons shifted. Martha carried on, but never stopped thinking about her wild companion. Then, one spring morning, an envelope arrived. It was an invitation. Smokey was about to be released into the wild. Her heart pounded as she made the trip to the nature reserve, a wide, open area designed to mimic Smokey's true home, the Central Asian steppes. Rolling hills stretched under a clear sky, and the breeze carried the scent of grass and earth. She stood with the rehabilitation team, watching as they opened the transport cage. Smokey stepped out slowly. He paused, blinking in the sunlight, his nose twitching at the unfamiliar smells. His movements were cautious, powerful. He was no longer the confused kitten she had once found in the alley. He was something else now, something greater. He moved forward, testing the earth beneath his paws. Then he stopped, lifting his head. In the distance, a figure emerged from the tall grass, another Pallas's cat, wild, free, and watching. For a moment, both creatures stood still. Then, to everyone's surprise, Smokey broke into a confident stride, heading straight toward the stranger with purpose. The two cats met, silent, still, and then vanished together into the wild landscape, two shadows melting into the grasses. Martha stood frozen, a storm of emotions swirling inside her. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't just tears of sadness. They were tears of peace. In that moment, she understood something powerful. Sometimes, love means letting go. The joy of keeping him would have been temporary. But this was real freedom. That experience changed her forever. She saw the world differently, not just through her own needs, but through a deeper understanding of nature, conservation, and love. She had helped save a rare creature, and in doing so, she had discovered a part of herself. As she walked away from the reserve, the wind brushed her face, birds called overhead, and the tall grass swayed gently. Somewhere out there, Smokey was home. Did you enjoy this story? Do you think Martha made the right choice? What would you have done in her place? Let us know in the comments. If you love this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another emotional tale. Sometimes the right thing doesn't feel right at first, but it leads to something truly beautiful. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video. Take care and have a wonderful day.